I have seen your profile on LinkedIn, and you have very interesting names drop there. So tell me, you filmed many interesting people and well known. So can you tell me one which was like most interesting or most exciting for you, and why?
Okay, so I used to work for a company that made party political broadcasts for the Labour Party, and this was back when I was working as a production assistant there first, and then the boss that we had was quite good at pushing people into further roles. So I was only in my early 20s, but he was like, okay, you're going to go out and direct this sort of thing, and it was like, you know, promos, corporates, that type of stuff. There was one day that we were filming Richard Attenborough at his home cinema in Richmond. I mean, this is a while ago, because of course he's dead now, sadly. And he was a truly just amazing man. You know, even though we only spent like an hour and a half with him, the way that he would tell stories and the sort of like little glint that he'd get in his eye when he was telling them and things, it was quite inspiring to be around him. And we were filming him because they just erected a statue of Nelson Mandela in Parliament Square, and he had spent quite a bit of time with Nelson Mandela, and they were good friends, and so he was telling stories about him. And one of the funny stories that he did tell was that he'd said Nelson Mandela thought Margaret Thatcher had nice legs. And I mean, I don't have a lot of nice things to say about Margaret Thatcher, but you know, at least she had nice legs, according to Nelson Mandela. But yeah, Richard Attenborough was a really great person to meet, even for just that small amount of time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Nice legs. Yeah.
Nice legs.
I never thought about it. Yeah.
No,
when I look at her.
I wonder if like Gillian Anderson took that into account when she was playing her on The Crown.
I don't know. So going like back to the childhood, let's say, did you always wanted to make films? Like when you were growing up, was it in the family, or how this basically was created?
Not at all in the family. My parents they owned pubs, and they were real estate agents, and you know, my mum was a hairdresser at one point. They had very sort of like non-artistic jobs, but I think when I was 10, I wanted to be a graphic artist for some reason. Like, I decided that designing logos was what I wanted to do. But then I took some graphics classes at high school and realized there was a lot of maths involved, and I wasn't so into that. So I decided I wanted to be a filmmaker. I can't remember the exact reason why, but I remember I was around 13 or 14, and I was doing drama classes at school, because, you know, at that time we didn't have like a media department or anything like this. So I was doing a lot of theatre, but you know, I loved watching films and TV and that kind of thing. So I was more interested in filmmaking than theatre directing, but I have done some theatre directing in the past. But you know, my mother will always tell stories about how when I was very young, I'd be playing with my friends, and we'd sort of you know, be creating some kind of world, and we'd be like, yeah, oh, you know, why don't we just say that she lives in the forest, and like, and like making up this little story world. And when I think back on that, you know, when I have conversations with my mother, I'm like, how could you not have thought I would want to go into some kind of storytelling? Because like that is what I was doing as a child. Like, and directing is like one big, why don't we just say that, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I think, it's from the very like early childhood when you can actually tell that kids are interested in storytelling and they go into this direction. I saw that in my case as well, which was around 10-year-old as well, which is quite interesting, because not many other kids were like that, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it is interesting to look at kids, see what they connect with, you know, like try and
exactly.
see if that propels into the future somehow.
So, asking about the films. So basically, filmmaking is a challenge.
It is.
Being a director is a huge responsibility, a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And in general, I would ask you which of your films that you made was the biggest challenge and why?
Okay, so most of my films the short films that I've made, like logistically, have been quite simple. I mean, aside from not having enough time or enough money, which are the big ones that we all have when we're. And I think even when you have the lots of money, the ambition is so big that that's still, a difficulty. I made a film in 2016 called Testing Greta, which is a story about domestic abuse. And that was challenging in a different way because we were trying to strike a balance between this kind of like darkly comic section at the beginning, and then it obviously like turns into a more dramatic thing that follows. And the reason we were kind of trying to strike that balance was because we wanted to change how the audience felt about the main character. So at the beginning, she comes into this nurse's office. She's kind of over the top, ridiculous, and the nurse is sort of, it's the middle of the night. She's tired. She's not taking this woman seriously. And as you go through the journey of the film, you realize that she's being abused. And there's this lovely moment when you watch the film with an audience where they go from laughing to like the you could hear a pin drop in the cinema. So it was challenging to find that balance. So it was challenging story-wise. I mean, there have been some challenging films that I've worked on, not as the director, but as the first AD, with filmmakers who have made, films that are like more ambitious logistics-wise. There was this one film that I was working on with a wonderful crew in Spain, where I was brought on as the first AD, and we were out in the middle of the desert. There was one day where they had to drive like an 8-hour round trip to Madrid to like get the camera kit and all of this kind of thing. And there was the scene was set in this shed, and the production designer had to like refit the entire shed to fit the aesthetic of the film. And then one of the lead actors, who we originally thought we had for 4 days, we ended up only having for like 48 hours, and that included him flying from London to like Alicante and then driving out into the middle of the desert. So we had to film with like very controlled lighting in this shed in like 40-degree heat, like in the middle of Spain. And I sort of walked onto the set with the producer, and everybody had, aside from the producer who lived there, it was his property we were filming on, everybody had been flown over from like Scotland, London, like all of these places. And I walked into the set and I said to him, why aren't we shooting this in a studio in London? Like, it'd probably be cheaper in the long run. And he's like, shut up, just don't say anything. But it was worth it for the exteriors. So yeah, I mean, the film turned out beautifully, and we had a lot of fun doing it. But yeah, in the midst of it, it was quite challenging. Very
funny and interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
Flying all those people.
Well, I mean, it was like a 10-day party, basically, making a film in the midst of it, and a few other people I'm still really good friends with today. So
nice.
Yeah.
Another question coming from this, basically, you started like in filmmaking. You start from the bottom and then you climb.
Yeah.
Was always your ambition to go all the way to directing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
Amazing. Love it. And right, so coming to that, basically, if there is aspiring filmmaker, do you have any tips for them, him or her especially?
Yeah. What I would say is that when I started out, it was everybody's ambition still to film on film. And if you were going to make something that wasn't on film, you were working on like a mini DV or like, something that you could tell a story with, but it wasn't going to be like as beautiful as you might want it to be as a filmmaker. And I think filmmakers starting out these days have it so much easier than anyone has ever had it. You can get a DSLR camera like we're using now with like some like high quality lenses that are not going to be that expensive. You can download an editing software onto your computer rather than having to buy like £100,000 Avid suite, all of these sorts of things. So I think it's a tip that I would have is just like get a hold of something, like even if it's your iPhone, and go out and just practice telling stories visually. Because it's so difficult to practice professionally, like short films and things, they're few and far between, they cost a lot of money, and yeah, it's hard to practice being a director. But I think if you've got even that small little equipment, just go out and take your friends and do it.
Yeah, that's very good point, because filmmaking is portrayed as this big crew, high-end equipment and very expensive, high budget. But when you start, like, you tell stories, and that you don't need money for that, basically. So whatever you have, and it's so accessible to anybody these days. It's unbelievable. Yeah. So yeah, I like this.
And any film festival worth their salt is looking for the story, the performance, and good sound as well. So make it silent if you don't have access to a sound person.
That's a solution. Thinking outside the box. Yeah. Tell me more about Money Shot series, because I think it needs some kind of explanation.
Yeah.
From when I look at it on YouTube, but it definitely caught my attention.
Okay, good.
So,
that's good. So Money Shot actually started. So I've got a co-writer that I work with in the States, and we've written 3 feature films that need homes at the moment. So we've written 3 feature films, and then Money Shot we'd written as a 30-minute pilot with another guy. So my co-writer is a guy called Kevin Kautzman. There was another guy called Lenny Platt, who's an actor and a producer and has been co-writing with us. It was an adaptation of a play that Kevin had written that was staged in New York that Lenny was in. And so the 30-minute pilot is about a collective of webcam like porn models who live in a dilapidated mansion in Detroit, and it's sort of their online lives and their personal lives and how they interact with one another. And so we'd written this pilot, and we did have like a few interesting meetings with production companies about making it. But of course, all of us are like untried and untested, so they were kind of like, it would be interesting to see like something practical. So we decided to write it as a web series, so that mostly to accompany any promotional material that we were sending to companies to get the 30-minute pilot made. But also we thought, well, why don't we just chuck it up on the internet and see if anybody connects with it. So the Money Shot Loose Change we've called the web series. The kind of theme for it is that each episode is a different character that's in the actual Money Shot series, and the theme behind each episode is about like unexpected ways to make money. So they go on thinking that they're going to do online sex, and then something changes. So one of them, the first episode, which we were speaking about, is called The Therapist, and so this guy expects his regular client to turn up, like they dress in leather, and like chat dirty to each other, I guess, but it turns out that client's husband gets on the call instead because he's seen these credit card things and is like, what the hell, like, is my partner having an affair? And then the webcam model kind of acts as a therapist to them, and they realize they come together and kind of realize the problems that relationship has. So yeah, we tried to sort of twist the ordinary exchange that would happen on one of these webcam sessions, because we actually we had a really interesting conversation with somebody at the Kinsey Institute about kinks in particular and how specific people's kinks are, and apparently that sort of stems in childhood somewhere, you know, and webcam models have given people the freedom to go, okay, this is this really weird thing that I'm into, I'm just going to come to like a sort of anonymous cam model to try and scratch that itch, I guess. And we spoke to some actual webcam models as well, and
research.
Yeah, for research, you know, they have some wild stories. So there is this one story about this guy who would, this wasn't actually from one of the webcam models, we'd read this somewhere. There was this one story about this guy whose thing was to try to sell his car to people. Like he would get off on trying to sell his car. So he would go into this brothel and he would go up to the receptionist and just try to sell her his car. The receptionist, you know, they would change and they'd say to the other people that worked there, like, oh, this guy just came in. He tried to sell me his car, and they're like, oh yeah, no, he does that every week. Like that's the thing that he's into, and that's where we got the idea for the one called Timeshare, where it's like this guy has lost his selling mojo, and so the cam model's like, what, you know, pitch me or do me your selling pitch, and then he eventually gets off on that. Yeah, so it came about because we're trying to sell a bigger thing, I guess. But
so what's more to come in a Money Shot? Like how many more episodes or series?
That was all of that we've done for the web series. We're hoping that we'll just be able to take that as part of our Bible, our script, and like be able to sell it to somebody to make the actual series.
It connected. Yeah. So you put it online and you can see that people.
Yeah, I mean it's the whole thing with YouTube views. That's sort of like, oh, okay, we've got to go try and get it up or whatever. But we'd also put it on Instagram TV and like a variety of different places. So there was good feedback across like a lot of the platforms. It's kind of up to executives to see whether they like it or not. The funny thing that we tried to do with YouTube was to put up, instead of the actual titles of the episodes, we'd put up a bunch of search terms that you would put on like Pornhub or something like that to see if, you know, people who were searching those things on YouTube would come across the series. And I guess they did, because we got a lot of spam bots doing comments. My phone notifications were just going off like all day with these spam bots, like, check out my sexy channel on like on like OnlyFans, and yeah, it was an interesting exercise.
I believe so. Yeah, I think it has potential, definitely. Like it's really interesting idea.
Yeah.
Overall, what would you say is the biggest misconception about filmmaking, if there is any?
There are a few. I don't think. Not like the biggest misconception necessarily for filmmakers in film, but there's big misconceptions for people outside of filmmaking on filmmakers, and one of them I think is that it's easy. So this is kind of a twofold thing. Like, you know, you'll get like myself as my parents don't do it, but like myself as a director or my friends who are actors and things like that, they'll go back home to like family gatherings and the actors get the classic like, oh, why don't you just be on EastEnders like line. It's like, sure, Uncle Steve, I'll just write to EastEnders and be like, yeah, can I have a job? Like, I guess that one of the misconception about that is they think that unless you're on something that they know, that you don't have any talent. And there's so many talented people who are not at that level of fame, I guess. And that's a difficult one. But the other side to the it being easy thing, and I'm going to throw a little bit of shade here. I've sort of like dated people in the past who are not in the industry, and because you know, people who are not in the industry are so connected to the industry through watching TV or watching film and things like that, they think that they know about it. so I was once dating this guy who was like, you're making a film, like, do you have any parts that would be suitable for me? And it's like, do you have no respect for me as a professional? Because of course, if I'm going to cast somebody, it's like they're gonna have, you know, show reels. They're going to have like previous roles. It's going to be a good actor that I'm going to cast, not just oh, you know, you're around, so like why don't you come and do this? And the same person I'd had a writing session coming up in the evening with my co-writer who I write with over Zoom, and he was like, the guy I was dating had texted me and said, oh, let me know if you need any help with your writing. And it's like, I texted back and I'm like, let me know if you need any help with your like tech call that you're on tomorrow. Like, yeah, I think that people, you know, they'll sort of say things like, oh, my workplace is quite funny. It would make a good TV series, and you know, I mean, I guess they're just trying to feel involved, but it does grate a little because it isn't an easy industry to be in. It isn't easy to like formulate a story that can continue for a long-running TV series. It isn't easy to come up with an idea for a film that's going to have high stakes and like conflict and inner conflict and like interesting characters and good dialogue and all of these sorts of things. So
not to mention putting it together, actually filming.
Yeah, actually filming.
And if
editing,
you forget one shot, you might miss the whole point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and it's so difficult. But yeah, people watch movies and they feel like they're experts because like, of course it's obvious that you would do it this way. Like, no, it's not. You start with the blank page. Come on. Yeah. So yeah, very good points. I like that.
Good. I'm glad.
We have actually mentioned a couple of funny stories behind the scenes.
Well, it was funny because I read that question and I was like, I don't have any stories. Not ones that are like out and out funny. And I've worked on a lot of comedies, so you would think that there would be, but maybe it's the opposite. It's just really serious when you're on set for a comedy.
Yeah, it might be actually, the opposite. But yeah. Is there something that went like really, really wrong during the filming on set? And
like a little kid about to
exactly like this. My heart stopped.
Yes. On a film that I was the first AD on, we and this film was an extremely chaotic experience, but a wonderful experience. It was a low budget feature that we were making years ago, and you know, it like there was no money. Everyone was working for free. It was kind of like, you know, you'd shoot a weekend here, like 2 weeks there. You know, it's just sporadic across. I think like the last pickup we did was like 5 years after we'd started. So there was all sorts of chaotic things that happened, like the actor getting his hair cut, like it being too long, you know, costumes getting lost from like 2 years previous. And there was one time where we were shooting on DVC Pro, and we were out in the middle of the countryside, like hours away from London, and there wasn't an extra tape, and there were all the previous tapes, and backups had been made of those, like they'd been digitized and put onto the computer, but you know, if you don't have it in two places, it doesn't exist. So there was a huge argument about whether we were going to tape over one of the tapes or just completely, you know, ditch the filmmaking process altogether for that weekend or what have you. But I'd rung a friend of mine, because the other thing was it was a bank holiday. It was like a bank holiday Monday. I rang a cinematographer friend of mine and I was like, you don't happen to know where you could get like DVC Pro tapes on a bank holiday Monday? And he said, actually, there's an emergency service.
Is there?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't need it now because you would just shoot on digital, it would be fine. But there was this emergency service where it was like, you could buy the tapes, but you also had to pay like a £90 call-out fee or something like this.
Of course.
But of course it was in London, so somebody had to take the van back, and the only person who was qualified to take the van back or insured to take the van back was the director. We were stuck out in the countryside for hours waiting for the director to drive back to London.
Oh my God.
And then drive back again and then finally shoot the scene. But we got the scene shot, so.
That's a good one, yeah. Right, and how about your future plans? What are the plans?
Okay. Big plans. Short term, I've got a couple of short films coming up in the next few months. And then the plan is to, I've got several feature films and several stages of development, but at least one of them is going to start shooting at the end of the year. So first feature is the big main short-term plan. But I would like to work in high-end television. Yeah. They talk now about like directors who get to do sort of like 13-episode Netflix series, and I would love to do something like that. Yeah.
Well, we've got Prime here.
Yes,
Prime Video.
and Prime. Yeah, one of them. Something high end. That's like I would really love to do some crime drama because I love to consume crime drama. So I've actually written a short for myself that is a crime drama based short. I'm hoping to get that done at some point because I love dark comedy and most of what I've done is dark comedy. But I would love to do some crime drama.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And in terms of your future films, can we see them only at festivals or are they going to be published on? I've got a few short films that are out on my website. So the producers had put those ones on YouTube. One of them that I mentioned earlier, Testing Greta, is available on Amazon Prime and it's available on Apple TV. Awesome. And there's one I've got that's at festivals at the moment, and the next couple will do a couple of years of festivals, you know, fingers crossed, and then be widely available somewhere, I guess. Awesome.
Yeah.
Good luck with
Thank you
everything.
very much.
And thank you so much for being
here. Thank you. It's been lovely to speak with you.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you. Awesome.